Well, I think we're live. I believe we are. I'm not sure. I had to end up refreshing the control panel just to even get it to go. So we'll wait a second and see if it actually comes up.
It doesn't look like it's coming up on the YouTubes.
There must be a delay or something. Come on. You can do it.
There we go.
Oh, okay. Cool. Wow. That's weird. Usually it's like right on the spot. Yeah, I see it coming through now.
You seem to be a little quieter than I am.
Let's see. That's probably because I am. There, that's probably a little bit better. I don't know. I can bump mine up just a little bit. Okay. So, here we are. It's Friday. Thank goodness. I'm ready for it to be Friday. You seem distressed, Matt.
Yeah, AT&T, they're awesome.
Yeah, I mean, hey.
I mean, what's the problem with having a cable running across 2 driveways for almost 2 months? No problem whatsoever.
You are not looking at the bright side. The bright side is you are at zero risk of accidentally cutting that cable if you need to dig up your yard.
Yeah, but two different people mowing their grass are at risk of cutting my cable.
I didn't say that. I said that you can't possibly dig it up on accident.
Anyways.
It's always something. So welcome to the Friday live stream. We're talking about users and roles and menu management, all that good stuff. I guess we'll do the intros first. So I'm Andy. Matt's on the right side of your screen. We are from Atlas Precision Consulting. We are an independent services provider for all things Profit 21, most things Profit 21, some things Profit 21. I don't know, Matt. Why don't you give them the rundown?
We are top to bottom P21. With our tagline is we're tool builders. We like to build things to alleviate your pain, whether that's through business rules, process improvement, or full-on software development. We do the fun stuff like reports and forms, but our biggest thing is trying to find the best way, the most effective way to get you to your changes that you want. And then we're also apparently YouTube influencers.
No. That
That's
cannot
what the
be
newsletter
true.
said. That is what the newsletter said.
That is marketing. That's what
the
is.
newsletter. I'm just saying.
I don't even know. I don't even think we do that good of a job of influencing ourselves.
And I'm still waiting for my cardboard standee for.
It's in it's in the new trailer that we're having sent to you.
Okay, so, cool. That works.
Yeah. It's there. It's coming. Just as soon as that cable gets buried, we can put the trailer in your driveway.
Oh, so never.
Oh gosh. Okay. So I don't know. How we want to start this one off?
Well, I think when you're looking at roles, user settings, and then a lot of that's tied to not only menu designer, but also screen changes via dyno changes and things like that. And we say this a lot, is kind of pencil out what you want things to be, because it's a lot easier to, just like anything, it's hard to unwind certain things. And if you're not put a little forethought into your planning out roles, planning out how they're going to be affected by screen changes, who wants to have access for this and who doesn't need access for this, you'll be a lot better off if you spend that time up front versus trying to roll it back. Because we've had customers that try to change roles midstream, and it's a lot of work. Like it's harder than it should be to roll it back. And then, so we'll just go through that. We'll go through, I mean, really, we can spend a lot of time just going through everything and user maintenance, I think, just to start off with, because I think there's a lot of people that don't understand necessarily not just what checkboxes do, but a lot of those application tab,
the application security tab. Yeah
what a lot of those things do and what they mean, and what maybe some best practices. And I feel like in a lot of other ERPs that I've been in, roles are much more in charge of security than they are in P21. I feel like roles are only play a role in security when it comes to dyna changes, menu designers, portals, things like that. But a lot of the actual toggles and stuff are broken down to the actual user level.
Yeah.
Because you can have somebody in a role, two people in roles, but they have completely different permissions because it's all based on their actual user settings.
Yeah. Yeah,
And-
we're going through, well, I mean, we've always got 2 or 3 implementations at least in flight at any given moment. And, I'm going through that process right now with some folks. And, if you're coming in to P21 cold, it can be confusing how all this stuff works. And I think, before we jump into the system, Matt, here's my question for you. Here's the big question. What's the right number of roles?
Well, the first mistake I see most people make is they get frustrated and just leave stuff wide open. And just like, people know what they need to use and people know what they don't need to use, which is, my opinion, the wrong answer. I would say in a normal set, now again, if you're a 10 user environment, that's probably a different scenario. But if we're talking to the 50, 75, 100 plus user environment, I would say, especially if you could break accounting down realistically into 3 or 4 roles. You could have an AP, AR, a credit manager. You could have these, but I would say no more than somewhere between 10 and 15, depending on the size of your company, is what I would think is normal.
Yeah, I mean, I'm kind of like on this the same way I am with ABC classes. As many as you need that are meaningful, right? I don't know if 40 is the right answer, but maybe it is for your organization. But if there's not a significant functional difference between 2 roles, then why do you just got more to manage? So keep it. The less stuff that the less overhead you create, the less stuff that you have to manage over the long haul. So to me, I think, I don't know. I want to keep it simple. I think we have like 4. That's it.
Yeah, and typically you have an admin or an all type that you would apply to, your system admin, or maybe even like an Uber, user. But again, I think people get hung up on roles as far as security and permissions, and it's really down to managing the user for a lot of that stuff.
Yeah.
Except for, it is easy to to control security with Menu Designer, where you can just completely block people out of windows entirely, and you don't have to worry about what permissions they have within those windows. It's just they can't get into them.
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly.
And which I learned recently. Thanks, we had a customer that requested something that even like a drill down, where everybody in P21 has seen the little box with the arrow that drills you down into, typically it's a drill down or some other window. So if I go to a Menu Designer and I block off my role from having access to AR drill down, by invoice, even if I click on the invoice number in sales order, it won't let me open up the drill down by AR because it knows my menu says, nope, he doesn't have access to that. So it's intelligent enough to even block those drill downs, which I like. I didn't realize it did that until we were playing around with something else. So that's how to me, that's how the security really works with roles. But the user is where permissions, I guess, is a better way to look at it.
Where do you want to start?
I don't think there's really any general system settings, is there? I don't think so.
Not that I can think of.
I'm going to say let's start with roles before we get into user, just because you have to apply a role to a user.
Yeah.
And you can see when we get in here how there are little options left. Now, I will say this though, it is a typical practice of somebody like us and other third parties to use this role maintenance screen to drive permissions overrides on customizations.
Yeah, that you bring up a good point. So, and we've been asked why we do it this way. So, in the configuration of a business rule, you can make that business rule apply to all users. That's the default. Or you can make it apply role by role in the configurator. We actually, or actually user by user if you want to get that granular. We actually don't handle it that way 99% of the time. The reason is because, at least it's always kind of been in my thesis, that business rules are more of like a developer level type of interaction. If you're getting in there and configuring
Actually
them,
setting them up and stuff.
yeah. So I don't want to push somebody over there to manage something when, you know, they're used to managing users, they're used to administrating roles, they're used to administrating menus or whatever. So when we set up things that, oh, hey, I want this rule to hit these 3 roles, or, you know, not this one or that one or whatever. Typically, like if they're going to set up a new role and that role should or should not be getting hit by that business rule, we want that in role maintenance. We want that visible when you set up the role as a visual cue to remind you, hey, I need to make a decision on whether or not I'm going to check this checkbox. And so that's why we do it that way. And we do a lot of different things that way. We very rarely, I mean, I can think of once in the last 3 years where I have used the actual Dynachange user / role level permissions on a business rule, because again, it's the first thing that you forget exists. And so that's just why we do that.
And it's generally our philosophy on any kind of customization. If we can give a spot in P21 for the user or the company to be able to manage, whether it's a delivery fee charge, you know, we don't want to hard code those in. We want to give you a spot somewhere in company or location maintenance where you can update the dollar figures. And the same thing with permissions on rules. You know, if you want a certain role to be able to save a sales order without applying a service fee or whatever, or to check a box to exclude, we'll typically put it here and label it just so it's.
We want it to be clear and simple. That's it.
Right. And so you don't have to pick up or write an email every time. Hey, we just added this role. Can you guys go fix the rule?
Yeah, exactly. Where when they add the role, they see the checkbox, then they know they need to check it right then and there. So yeah, this system only has 1 role, so we can happily add another one, which you don't. All you have to really fill in is the description of the role. That's it. There's really only 2 things that you can do with a role, other than the whole customization sidebar we just went through. But,
right.
And that is controlling the display of portals. And then, so I had
this one. I'm not 100%.
I am, and I appreciate that it's here, and I hate that it's here, all in the same breath. Here's the deal. So I just went through a session with an implementing customer, and I was like, okay. I mean, I walked them through the menu designer. I walked them through how roles work and this and that and the other. And they emailed me in a panic about 4 days later going, is there any way we can automate these permissions? Because it says permission on the tab. Because there's like 6,300 objects that we have to manage. And I'm like, first off, I had to think for a minute. I'm like, what are they even talking about? And then I realized, oh my gosh, it's the data service API tab. That's all this is controlling what this role can retrieve from the data services or OData API, really from the OData API. The data entity or data services API is totally separate. But so there's an OData API that allows you to access views and tables, including custom ones that you may have put into the system if you can do that. And which is great. And I don't even disagree with the concept of managing it on a role by role basis, but like it caused confusion and it enough confusion that it even kind of threw me for a loop because I wasn't even sure what they meant. And so, it was like, don't worry about it. Well, are you sure there's a lot of security in there? I'm like, there really isn't. It looks scary, but it actually doesn't mean anything because you have no API integrations and your API is not even, nobody's even set up to hit it yet. So don't even worry about it. And it's only 20% of the API, which is crazier still. So that's what this is all about. This is about what tables and or views you're going to expose for a user in that role through the OData API. That's it.
And correct me, a lot of times when we use the API, do we not create like a specific user?
I do.
Yeah.
And then I assign that user to a role. I can even create a specific role for it. But there's enough security, my opinion, between having a consumer key and then exchanging that for a token, and then making another call to get into the OData API. I don't dig this at all. And I mean, for me, I'm just like, yeah, okay, great. I'm gonna hit allow all and be done with this. I'm not gonna go flip through here and manage all of this. And the reason for that is very simple. You still have to configure which views you want when you set up your consumer key. So it's like you have to manage it twice. Yeah. And I'm just like, guys, come on, let's stop the madness.
99.999% of your users will have no idea what any of this means.
So just, I mean, I am totally cool with just like close that, get it out of your way, don't even worry about it. Portals, I think this is useful. Being able to define portals at the role level, that's a great way to manage it.
If not, you got to manage at the user level, which if you have 100 users, you do not want to do.
Yeah. And usually it's going to be a mix of both, but stick to roles as much as you possibly can because, again, you're managing wide swaths and it's much easier to deal with.
And obviously, if you try to check delete and it's applied to a user, it's not going to do anything. It's going to say, nope.
All right.
That's really it for creating roles as far as, that's it for creating them. We'll get into how we would use them in Dyna changes and menu designer by the end of this. I don't expect this to be this isn't going to be a 4-hour stream on users. Now, there are a lot of things to go over in user maintenance. I mean, I do wish that some of these permissions did live at the role level.
Or maybe had a default at the role level that you could override at the user level.
Yeah, because I feel like it would. Now, I will say this. With mass update, there's a way to copy users and bring in new users. So you can create, because when we first got into it, there was no way to, because we were on the desktop, mass update wasn't there. I think there was something in SQL you could use to copy users. But as far as a front-facing interface, mass update can be used to. So if you have 20 new roles to users to set up, you don't have to manually go through. You can copy them, and but that's a whole nother. Did we do a stream on mass update?
We haven't yet. We need to. I think it's in our.
Did we? Are you sure we didn't?
I don't remember.
I don't remember anything.
Dude,
I know I did. I know I did some subset of videos, like training videos on them on the channel. I don't know if we did a stream on it.
Yeah,
but anyways, user ID. Obviously, this is one of those where you have to name the user ID, whereas in like role, you don't. It just gets assigned a number.
Yeah.
Name. That's pretty self-explanatory. I mean.
Yeah.
Now email. Do you need that if you're going?
You do. There will be things where if you don't set up an email address, you're going to get an error out like, hey, I can't send this email because I don't know who it's supposed to be from, basically.
And do you need that to tie it into like Office 365, like, or not Office, AD?
I think if you use Active Directory integration, I think that actually runs off the user ID, but we've only got a couple of people that are using like legit Active Directory. If you're just talking about I can log in and it just automatically works, that's all driven off of the user ID.
Do we want to create a new user?
Sure.
Or do you? Well, I guess it doesn't really matter.
No, we might as well. It works for me.
Correct me if I'm wrong. It's been a while. When you create a new user, the first time they log in, it'll make them set a password. Or do you?
No, that's going to be controlled. So, like if you're using SQL accounts, that's controlled by SQL, and if you're using Active Directory accounts, it's just going to be the same as their AD.
Okay.
Now, I will say this. In the cloud, they have recently launched the ability to tie your Epicor identity in and use login through Epicor identity. We have a couple of clients already doing that. Once you set it up, it's not a big deal. You just get an invite. You have to accept the invite, and then that links your Epicor account with that instance. For the overwhelming majority of line of business users, it's not, it's like, okay, whatever. I actually like it for us because we can tell new clients, hey, here's my Epicor identity, set up my username, set up my email, send me an invite, and bang, we're in. And we don't have this whole rigmarole of trying to get in, and we don't have to have 50 different passwords. So, I mean, look, I know there's a propensity to hate on the public cloud, and I've got my issues. I'm not saying that I don't. But there are things about it that at least from a consultant's perspective, is kind of nice. That's the level of friction for us to be able to help clients now to just get into their system and help them is way lower when they're in the public cloud.
I would say the upside for sure is we're not dealing with 100 different variations of how people have their system set up.
Yeah, it's pretty consistent. The permissions that we get are extremely consistent. And then, the stuff that makes it harder, look, we've started to figure out how to work with that, and we've changed our architecture. I think, Matt, for the better, and maybe that's a live stream for another day, but I think a good, healthy discussion of on-prem, public cloud, MSP hosted, maybe that's a conversation worth having at some point.
Yeah.
But the bottom line is, it is what it is, whatever your setup it entails, and so you just kind of have to roll with it, and you adapt your approach accordingly. You can't keep programming like it's 10 years ago, because it's not 10 years ago.
Yep.
Anyway, okay, I'm off my soapbox.
Nope, that's fine
for the moment.
There are very few actual required fields, which I always find amusing on creating a user. Obviously, it's user ID, name, default company, because a user is. It's weird that you have to set a default company, but you don't have to set a default everything. I would have assumed everything else would have been default, but you don't have to.
So, in a few of the implementations I've gone through there, I think there's a few cases out there where it makes sense not to default a user on the location level, especially if they're doing order entry for multiple sales locations. It is kind of nice to not default them, because then you're kind of forcing them to choose, and they can't accidentally credit the wrong branch or the wrong location for a sale. So I kind of like that. I hate it in that a lot of the rules that we've done in order entry kind of assume that sales location ID is going to be filled in. We've been bitten on that a couple of times, but whatever.
And I would say probably the majority of people I've seen do have defaults to set in. And again, really what that's, if I go start a sales or if he goes and starts a sales order, it's going to default to sales location 10.
Yeah.
Now, based on how you have, you can change that as long as you haven't started entering items onto the order. Once you've started entering items on the order,
you're done.
You're done. You have to clear it and start over. Script path. That's a more technical one.
Yeah, so script path, logo path, user report, user signature path, client log path, these are hyper situational. In fact, I don't think we've done those fields for a customer in probably 4 or 5 years. It just gets into how things are being routed around. I actually think those are more harken back to what we would have called a fat client implementation, where you have a central SQL server and then the P21 desktop app is installed individually on each workstation. And so maybe that script path is local to their machine and not sitting out, I couldn't imagine.
It's just one of those things I've
administrating
very
that way.
rarely seen any. I don't know if I've actually, honestly, I don't know if I've ever seen anybody put it in.
So I've used it a couple of times for like the things that I think it is handy for. It is like if I'm a system administrator and I'm testing Crystal reports, I'll set my own user report path temporarily because I can test the new reports or forms rather, without messing anybody else up, because it's only looking in that directory. And then when I'm happy with it, I can migrate them out. Again, I'd really rather just see people use a play system for that, but whatever. So that's really what most of that's about. Again, I think they are large, in my personal humble opinion, without drawing the ire of the internet. I think they're I think it's safe to call them deprecated, maybe even go so far as to say they're pretty much obsolete, I think, but that's just me.
Are we ready for my first soapbox?
Go for it.
Buyer ID. I despise buyer IDs in P21. Buyer IDs do not need to be the same person. You don't have to go out there and create a buyer ID for every user. Because even on POs, you have to put a buyer ID, but there is also a field called taker. I think it's hidden by default on the PO entry screen, but still it's there. So it records the user that's actually creating the PO. And this is just my opinion on how the buyer ID should actually work, or at least the way they seem to have intended it. It's more like a hierarchy of, I'm Joe Blow, but my buyer for my group is Andy. And, we'll get to the buying threshold here shortly. And so that buyer, like, we kind of all report to one buyer, and they're in charge of buying and maybe approving POs that we don't have permission. I'm not a big fan of how buyers work, because you would think buyer IDs would have something to do with buying limits. No, they really have nothing to do with other than
Just
you can assign a and you can assign a buyer ID to a supplier. So if you want to, only that buyer can do it.
I don't even like the way that works, Matt.
No, because I could just type in a buyer ID, and I'm not a fan of it. But you have to enter a buyer ID for to place your POs. So my recommendation: don't go through and try to create a 1-for-1. If you have 200 employees, don't create 200 buyer IDs. There's no reason to.
Yeah, I think, like the one thing I don't like about how buyers work at the supplier level, unless they've changed this in the last couple of years, like if you assign a buyer to a supplier, even if someone else runs Porg wide open and tries to catch that supplier's requirement, it's not going to show up in Porg.
Nope, only if you
shows
enter
up
their
for
buyer
their buyer ID. That to me is like that's a minefield. That is an explosion looking for a place.
But at the same time, it's and I think it's where people get confused. If you were the buyer ID on DeWalt, I can still, as Matt, open up Porg, put your buyer ID, run for DeWalt, and purchase. And it just adds a level of complexity for no real reason.
Yeah, I feel like there was a purpose behind it that maybe never got fully developed out. I don't know.
So again, you don't have to put one in there, but I would, come up with if you do want to create 1-for-1 for everybody, just for whatever purposes, then that's fine. But if not, every user is going to have to enter it every time they go into create a PO. All right, this is where we're going to spend some time, because there's a lot. There's a lot. A lot of these are self-explanatory, right? Create customers, create ship tos. Again, these are things I would have liked to be at the role level.
Does this allow you to create a prospect even if it's unchecked?
I don't know. I would think so, because prospects can't affect anything as far as.
No, but they live in the same table. It's just a different code underneath it. Like the customer type code is 1203 for a customer and 1204 for a prospect.
That's interesting, because the only other thing I know of is to convert a prospect to a customer.
That might, yeah. I would think you could create a prospect.
I would think so, because it's not. It is in the same table, but it's, there's no GL implications. There's no way to sell somebody something as
this prospect. Yeah.
Create transfers and OEs. If you watched last week, where we talked about dispositions, that just allows there to be a checkbox enabled for you to generate and to have that T disposition. Link back orders, purchase orders. I think we covered that on our purchasing.
Yeah, we like that one.
I'm a big fan of that one as far as locking inventory. I don't like create contract from OE. I'm just not a fan of doing contract, because I've never been able to get it to work very well.
It's not complete, my opinion.
Yeah. In theory, it sounds great. But I've never been able to fully get it to, and maybe it's just my ignorance on the proper way of using it, but I feel like it got there like 50% of the way, and then somebody kind of switched.
And if it's a contract that's like a VMI where you have bins and stuff, forget it. You don't want to use it, because you're still going to have a lot more work you have to do to get your bins set up.
That last one there, I actually really like that one for the default. Now, I hate it when I'm testing in our play systems.
You certainly hate watching me do it.
It's what it says, right? Because once you start entering items onto an order, just like you can't change the sales location, you can't turn an order into a quote, and you can't uncheck the quote box if you've already started entering items. We've always found that very useful, like for our outside sales reps, like when they're just entering stuff into the orders and system, but we don't actually want to hold up inventory or anything like that. And they don't have to go check the box. That's really all it is. So I would like to see that, like, an outside sales role option, but whatever.
Well, so, this is one, I think my opinion on this checkbox has evolved over time. I think this checkbox makes sense to have on by default for pretty much all users when you first go live. But I think you back that up with making the quote checkbox highlighted in red so that people don't forget that it's there, and put it right next to the order number or whatever. But I think over time, as people get used to the system and they're used to entering orders, then I think you can start backing this off and letting people go straight to order. The only reason I say by default for the first few weeks or maybe a month, is just so people aren't, they're in a new system that you can convert a quote to an order, but you can't go the other way around. And if somebody meant to put in a quote, they accidentally put in an order. Now materials allocated. If the ticket scan's running, you got an implication there as well. Mm-hmm. So,
display historical cost and sales history. A lot of these options you'll see in here, and we'll get into some more of these, are more of just what information you want people to be exposed to.
Yeah.
Is it important to their job? Again, go back to, it'd be nice if it was at the role level. But is it something that this person who might be in a sales role needs to see this? And I believe it just activates another tab in order entry. Default to advanced search.
I think this is situational. I think if you're a person that's creating items on the fly a lot, or you need to create items on the fly, you don't want this turned on.
Yeah. Now, this isn't to be confused with inline search.
Correct. No, this is just like which version of the search pop-up you get by default.
Any search window you go into, there'll typically be a drop down with different types of searches, item extended, and there are different features that come along with those. And if you use advanced and you try to type in, we had this with somebody typing in was it an alternate item ID? No, short code. So if you have this turned off and you type in a short code for an item, even if that item's not at your location or added to your location, it'll still bring it up in the search and say, hey, do you want to add this to your location? If you have advanced search on, it just ignores the short code unless you go into the actual search window and, try to search for it. So,
and
again,
for item searches as well, like if you're in advanced search, the add new, add temp, and add assembly buttons will not be there. You have to go back to standard search to see that. So if you're consistently creating those types of items, I mean, you don't want to have to change search menus every time. So you don't want to be on advanced search. I think this is one, I have a suspicion that this is one that gets set globally for an organization, and users would benefit from a little bit more granularity and thought into who's going to use what, if they even know that there's an option. And I would be willing to bet they probably don't.
No, and it was one of those options where when we said it, our assumption was it was tied to inline search.
Yeah.
Which it's not.
Yeah.
Order default item search to previous requests. I don't know why. Is that grayed out because we're not using advanced search? Why is that grayed out? Oh, I have no idea why that's grayed out. There's something else that's triggering that.
Yeah, I don't know.
Don't have an answer for that. I do like previous requests. Vendor RFQ receipts.
That's for updating supplier costs.
I've never actually used this before. I understand the idea of it, but
I mean, I've used RFQs a few times. This again, I think, is very situational. If you have locked-in pricing, for the most part, and you're just using RFQs to get special pricing and stuff like that, I don't think you want to be turning this on because you're going to get cost updated by accident. However, if your business is more ad hoc from a pricing perspective, where you're always out there trying to hustle the best deal or whatever, this is nice because whenever you do an RFQ receipt, it will go ahead and automatically update your supplier costs. So I kind of like that. But again, situational to your business. You shouldn't just be checking boxes for the sake of checking boxes.
I just check it and see what happens.
Like stockable?
Yeah,
you knew I was going to slide that in somewhere.
Choice, not a default. Convert prospect to customer. Now, is there actually or is that just to be able to change the type?
Well, that's in OE. So like if you go to launch an order and you put a prospect, you put in a customer ID that's a prospect, it'll prompt you to say, do you want to convert?
Because you can place quotes for prospects.
Absolutely. But if you try to convert to an order, or you try to do an order, if that's turned on, I think it'll prompt you. If it's turned off, it'll just tell you you can't do it.
View purchase pricing libraries information. Again, it's just more
cost related type stuff.
More cost related stuff, which again, the cost related stuff's all kind of all over the place in here. All right, now where a lot of those
all together.
It would be great, wouldn't it? This last, well, not last, but these set of drop downs are probably the ones that I would say most people pay attention to.
Yeah.
Creating an item at order entry.
Yes.
It not only allows you to, it controls both creating a brand new. Oh no, that's a different option. Again, it's dumb. So there's another option for adding items to your location.
Yeah, this
is creating it from the ground up.
This is whether or not you're enabling item on the fly.
Yeah, I don't like item on the fly, but that's just me. I get it. I understand people's businesses.
That's
the
key.
Has to happen.
Yeah,
it has to happen. But I would say, if it's not like we have companies that do a lot of, hey, we're out here working on somebody, and we just have to add some screws to this order that we bought at Home Depot. I get it, but the problem is I see people leave this on, and you just get dirty data. It's just bad. You just get, they put a dash in between this, and it created a whole brand new part number when that part number already existed.
I would say item on the fly is probably the leading cause of duplicate part numbers and useless data or whatever. Because especially if your item, if you're going to use item on the fly, you really, really need to have your item defaults dialed in, because that's where most of the setup's going to come from.
Well, and that's where I still have I still think it's still going to require somebody on an item team or somebody to have to go back
And
and
review it.
probably clean up something.
Yep.
So again, I get it. I'm not a big fan of it. Same option below, but that's for service order.
Yep. Yeah, and your options there are regular, temporary. Both of those are none. And what's the difference between a regular item and a temp item? Not really much of anything.
It's just a drop down.
Yeah, it's a classification.
Yeah,
I don't
that's really
even
all
know. Never mind.
It doesn't go away. Like it can't. Like it's still there.
No, but like when I was on Mincron many moons ago, like our temp items, they were one-time use items.
Mm-hmm.
You would do a /999, and it would generate a new part number that started with /999. You could put it on an order. You could buy it because you'd just have to key in a description. You would receive it. You would ship it on that job, and then that part number could not be used again. That, to me, is a good use of a temp item. Anyway, moving
on. Should I get on my soapbox about the OE?
What, creating POs from OE?
No, just the fact that it's order entry when it should be sales order entry. But
well, that's service order entry, though.
I know, but never mind.
What would you call service order entry if not SOE?
Well, here's my problem with P21. Well,
really, that's so. This is going to be a 4-hour live stream.
I mean, you have purchase orders, you have transfer orders, you have the service order, but you just have order entry. Like, there's no designation that that's actually a sales order or a quote order.
You used to have work order.
Yeah,
back in the
production order, secondary process order, whatever. Create PO from order entry. This doesn't mean that you can't set an item to an S or D disposition. This just means you don't get the PO wizard to launch from order entry.
Yeah, so this is a matter of process. Are you
right.
going to allow the person doing order entry to go ahead and create a direct or a special or both? Or does that have to go through purchasing and they'll pick it up when they run PORG or however they're sweeping through?
Right, because there is also again, tied to cost in a later spot here, there is something that's tied to if you are giving people permissions to create POs from order entry, you may want to turn something else on that we'll get to in a second. Again, this doesn't mean they have to use the wizard. This doesn't mean it just allows them the ability to do it. Now, I will say by default, if you have this turned on to allow and they do a D or S disposition item, that checkbox is pre-checked.
Mm-hmm.
So if they don't uncheck it, when they hit save, it's just going to try to launch the PO wizard.
Mm-hmm.
So, but at the same time, if that goes on credit hold, it won't let you do that. You won't be able to launch a PO. So you have to uncheck it, save it, and then when you go back into it, you'll have to recheck the box. So just play with it.
I'm a proponent of setting it this way.
Yeah.
In most cases. Now, look, I get there's a million reasons to not do it that way or whatever, but in most cases, I think it's okay to let a direct ship happen as long as you can reasonably trust the people doing it. And then you manage the things that go haywire. But, other than that, I don't really dig the idea of creating POs to put stock in the system from order entry. I just don't like that.
Adjust quantity available at OE.
Can't change it, so I don't know.
I'm guessing there's probably a system setting somewhere.
Yeah.
But my answer
I
would
think
always
there
be.
is. Yeah.
My answer would always be
no. Right. Oh, I don't have that. Well, okay, great. I'll just adjust it out. Look, there are like if we were a distributor with our team at our size, I might be inclined to enable it for some users because it's like, look, I don't want to jump 6 screens to go figure this out. Let's just handle it.
Right. But you better be sure on the people you have.
Yeah.
Before you do something like that.
Absolutely.
Create vendor RFQ again if you want, and that's not even. Oh, okay, I see. So you can't see in the drop down, but this allows you to do it from order entry, allows you to do it from purchasing or both. I say this is probably something I see very few people actually using a lot.
So what I would tell you is with RFQs, and maybe we do this on a live stream one day, is if you are sending out the same list of material to multiple vendors and then you're cherry picking that off to get the best overall deal, vendor RFQ could be a benefit to you. It really could. Okay. That's all.
Again, default item search. This is very situational. I would say most people have stock and non-stock checked.
Mm-hmm.
You can make it so
you can do it all for your location, non-stocks, stock and non-stock, temporary. Those are basically your options.
I mean, I could see all items at a location where if you don't, because depending on how you have some of your search setting setups, you can see inventory from other locations in the advanced search. So maybe your users aren't allowed to do that and they just need to only be concerned with what's at their location, I guess. But I would say most common I've seen is stock and non-stock.
Sure.
Allow search from item catalog. Item catalog is one of those things that I've never really used before.
We've got a couple of customers that have used it. And I think that, look, I mean, at the end of the day, I've got mixed feelings about it at this point. So if this was 10, 15 years ago, and we're talking about storage speed and compute and things like that being a legit issue, you know, back in the days where 8 gigs of RAM on a SQL server was a lot. Mm-hmm. Okay, let's have that conversation. That it makes sense to have things segregated off in the item catalog and bring them into the item master as you need. But we have people with 1 million plus SKUs in the system now. And I don't know. I'm not saying that the item catalog has outlived its usefulness, but I think that as compute goes up and goes up faster than the needs of the system go up, I think that the item catalog as a concept starts to get diminished a little bit.
Yeah.
I don't even know what the next one does.
Yeah, no idea. Change items to sellable in OE.
Yes. That I think it really just kind of depends. Like, if, you know, I always get asked the question, like, okay, why would I ever mark an item not sellable? Easy one, component. It's a component of a kit, you don't want to sell the component. Or it's a raw material for manufacturing, you don't want to sell the raw material. For the most part, I would say if you've made a decision that item should not be sellable, then having it changed on the fly in order entry doesn't make sense to me.
Yeah, I mean, and if you're not somebody that doesn't use bins, I've seen people use the sellable checkbox as a way to, hey, there's been an issue with this item. We need to figure something out before we start selling more of these.
Yeah, instead of quarantining it off or something.
Right.
Yeah.
If you're using bins, my suggestion would be to transfer it to a quarantine bin. But if you don't, but no, I'm a silo kind of guy when it comes to sales guys' jobs or to enter sales orders
and sell more stuff.
Yep. And sell more stuff.
Yep.
They shouldn't have to be making location. Adding items to a location is kind of it's a much more. So when you do item on the fly, there are certain options you have to fill in. When you add an item to a location, meaning it's already in the system as an item for location 10, I'm in location 20. If I have this on, it'll pop up and say, hey, do you want to add this item to your location? There's no settings. It just pulls in item defaults or pulls in. Yeah, I think it just straight up pulls in item defaults. Mm-hmm. I don't think it copies it from one location.
Correct.
Again, I'm not a fan of that because somebody else is going to have to go clean it up after the fact.
Yeah, I think, you know, to me, it's one of those things where a lot of it's going to turn on how your lines of distribution are set up. So let's say that you're authorized to sell XYZ product line in one territory, but not another. Mm-hmm. Then, I mean, obviously you could also use item restrictions or some custom derivative of that. But again, you're either desiring to control or desiring to make it easy to sell things outside of the locations where they were already set up. So
allow non-stop transfer back orders. Well, I hate transfer back orders in general.
You're not going to get a lot of
and letting somebody back order a non-stock item on a transfer just seems
awful.
Yeah, like it's not a non-stock then. If somebody's like,
I mean, if we're into a regional distribution center scenario or something like that, okay, maybe. Or if you've got a bunch of inventory of non-stock items and you want to try to get rid of it, okay, maybe. But
yeah, but
but
at that
actually
point,
you
you're
would
getting rid
because
of
it's a back
yeah,
order. Yeah, no, so
right.
forget it.
So
It doesn't even matter.
restricted class overrides. I've never used any of that, so I don't even.
I mean, restrictions are like, I mean, okay, I like this because if you had restrictions in place, like you can't sell to this type of customer with this product or whatever, but you wanted to let a sales manager be able to override that, okay, I like that. But I mean, what's the point of setting up item restrictions if you can just override it? I don't understand that.
Add customer part number and OE just prevents you from having to go to
Customer part number maintenance.
Part number maintenance.
That I think should be turned on. You should make it as easy as possible to set up part number interchange for your customers.
Yes. Show location, IMI pop-up window.
Yeah,
is that
I think that's in the search. I don't think that's in the.
Yeah, that's worded poorly. When it says it's the advanced search.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Or not advanced search. The inline search drop-down window, I think.
Something like that.
Allow customers to change.
This is the ability to change who the customer is after you've already got an order going. I think it's before you save it, but while you first,
I get you.
I remember when that got added to the system. It's probably been five years ago, maybe 6.
But if it's before you save the order, then I guess
it should
okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, but now there is a way using. Again, I'm a big fan of previous requests. There is a way to use previous request from somebody else's order to create an order for a different customer.
Yeah.
All right. Roll. Hey,
Hey,
we're back to roll. Hey. We don't have strategic pricing turned on in the system, I don't believe.
Nope.
All right, designer rights. Your options are none, which 99% of your users should be set at. User,
this
meaning
is the worst possible thing you can
do not do that. Basically, user allows them to create and modify only design changes for their user ID.
Right, which means they're going to create design changes for their user ID.
There's no option for role, meaning anybody in sales role or whatever role they're assigned to.
They could save to the sales role. Yeah.
Right. And then both means they can do their role and their user.
Yep.
And then admin means you can do it for everybody.
Yeah.
You should not have more than 1 or 2 people in your system with admin.
Yep.
Actually, you should have more than 1 or 2 people, in my honest opinion, with anything other than none.
Well, back in the day, there was no admin setting. You had to log in with the admin account to be able to save dynamic changes across multiple roles. So that's kind of where that came from. But I agree. I think none is where you want to be for most people. And
there was a time when Report Studio first came, because this job down for report creation, Report Studio didn't used to be there.
Correct.
It was tied to designer rights or extensibility rights or something.
Which is it was nightmare.
It was like they just tacked it on to something else.
So extensibility rights ties back into designer rights. If you have extensibility, is just a fancy way of saying what fields can be added. So if you say add existing columns only, that's going to be they can only add things that are already in the field chooser. If they have it set up to add existing and new columns, you can go in and create UDFs and stuff like that. So again, your admins, they should have everything. Everyone else, if they're set to none, it's not even going to matter.
Right. And again, even if somebody says, "Oh, I'm really good," like really, it should be a handful of people that can do this.
Well, I will tell you this. I think there's and we use this concept here. So there's, a couple of us here that are domain admins that we have full rights to do anything on our network, period. But we have separate accounts for that. Like I don't log, like my normal user account doesn't have administrative rights. I get the same UAC prompts as everybody else. And when I need to do something administrative, I use a separate login for that. I hated it when I first had that set up on me, like in 2015, but now, 10 years later, I'm kind of used to it and I actually like it. And I would be a proponent of the same thing in P21 of saying, look, we're going to have, if we have users that are line of business, but they also have an administrative function, give them an administrative logon that they can go make those changes from, so that you're just not going to have any accidents,
Report studio creation, which we did a whole video on that. I like where Report Studio start. Like, I like the idea of it. I still think it's got a long way to go. But this, again, allows you to create reports just for nobody, you, or role, or all. I don't remember what the other options are. I think that's
role, user, all, and none.
Yeah.
So
again, if I create a report,
it's just like designer. It's like, who can you create reports for?
Right. I think it's also... Is it who can you only see your?
I think this is just creation.
This is just creation.
Because
okay.
you would assign. You
That's right. You can assign roles.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. I got you. All right. PO threshold. For some dumb reason, the checkbox
way
is
over
to
here.
The right. So if you enable that and you put a 0 there,
that's unlimited.
Yep. No, unlimited is checkbox, unchecked. If you
if it's 0, then it's 0, 0.
Yeah, it's 0, 0.
Wow.
Yeah,
See?
I think that's probably why the checkbox is there.
Well, it's good that it's right next to it.
Oh yeah, basically, even if your POs or in system settings, there's an approval defaults. Almost everybody has POs set to approved and sales orders to approve. I mean, it's just normal. What this allows you to do is say, if this needs PO approval and set to $0, if I go try to place any PO, it's going to tell me I can't save it as approved. I have to save it unapproved. And then in theory, the process would be my buyer would need to go look at unapproved POs and approve or not.
If they have enough approval threshold on their own to approve the PO.
Right. If they have enough, yeah. So it's basically your buying limit.
Yep.
I would have liked that tied to, like, if you were actually going to make people put buyer IDs, to me, it should have been assigned at a buyer ID.
Yeah.
But neither here nor there.
So, one derivative of this that I think there's places where I see people like get a little tripped up with P21 and they end up working for P21 instead of P21 working for them. Credit management, I think, is one where the credit limits are so restrictive that like 40% of the orders are going on hold. And so then the next complaint is I'm always having to release orders. I just had this conversation with somebody last night. And, so from credit management, I say, set a reasonable days overdue for credit hold and be liberal at first with your credit limits until you get used to the system and then start drawing it in where it makes sense. With PO approval thresholds, I see the same problem. People will go in and like, I don't want anybody creating a PO for over $10,000 or whatever it is. And so they set that hard limit, and then now you're creating this cascade of approvals, especially when costs are going up. What I would challenge people to do is think about what is it you're really trying to achieve. Do you want to know that $10,000 POs are being created, or do you actually want to approve them? If you just want to know, set up an alert that alerts you whenever a PO gets created that meets those thresholds. And then you'll get an email and you can look at it and say, okay, I understand. Or if you want to go look at it and ask questions from that buyer, you can do that. But the process keeps moving forward. And you can give them a PO limit that prevents them from screwing something up. So for instance, I think every buyer should have some limit. And, even if it's $100,000 or whatever it is, because it will 100% prevent a fat finger. Somebody puts in quantity 10,000 instead of 1,000, that PO approval threshold can help protect you from doing something like that. Or they putting in, they put in a wrong price, misplaced a decimal or whatever.
disgruntled employee knows he's leaving in 3 weeks, goes in, starts placing
Yeah.
tens of thousands of dollars of POs without anybody being aware.
Yeah, puts you on the hook for it. So I think, I like PO approvals, but I think what you do is you have like a hard limit and then you have a soft limit underneath that you alert on, just so you know, okay, this person's doing this, that, or the other. You're not necessarily stopping it because it's not abnormal, but at the same time, you're not creating this monstrous amount of approvals that you then have to go back and do. So just my opinion.
Now, here's a question for you. So we learned, trying to help, and I don't remember, we talked about this or we talked about it last week with our disposition conversation, where S&D disposition items from sales orders ignore target freight values set at the supplier level.
Correct.
My question is, does it ignore this?
No, this is
okay.
Enforced.
This is okay. All right, before we jump here, layouts. Yeah, I love this. So there's a in between those two related fields, there's something that's not technically related to it, is this drop down for viewing cost and profit in order entry.
Yeah.
Default, there's a system setting.
Correct.
But here's the trick. If you're allowing people to place POs from order entry and the vendor tells them, oh, well, this is going to be 10% more, here's your cost in this item, and they don't have all or default set up so they can see the cost tab, they can't enter a PO cost because the cost tab is not active.
Details, man. Just details.
Yeah. And then, so
now technically you could Dynachange. I think you could actually Dynachange the PO cost field into the main part of OE. Maybe.
Yeah, but that's just creating a whole nother Dynachange when. So my opinion, if you're allowing PO creation from, because here's my thing, like a lot of those fields, like you said, they do exist. You can add them, like the profit percentages and all that kind of stuff. You can add them on the OE line. And then, so technically that drop down is also related kind of to the one above it too, because you have those other costs that you can display.
Yeah. And then how you're going to default cost on the order, which is, or how, what the default order cost basis is. Again, the labeling's terrible. So it's order, commission, or other, just the same as the check boxes.
Right. I know there's some people that have issues with allowing that cost tab because there is stuff like profit. And if you change, hey, I want to make 40 on here, it just changes what the price and the cost. I don't know.
Look, I'm again, risk of drawing the ire of the internet. The most profitable companies I see do not work off cost.
Yep.
It shouldn't even matter. I sold valves and hydrants for several years. I couldn't tell you what the cost on them was. I have no idea.
Default sales rep on order.
Oh, where are we at? Oh, down here? Yeah.
Yeah, because I kind of jumped over because that one was in there. So, but if you set a sales rep on the customer or and a ship to, does this override that then?
No idea.
Yeah, so to be determined, I would say if it's important to you that it's always the sales rep that's on the customer, don't set anything in there. Oh, you did the guided tour thing, which is just wonderful. Just hit the X because it's just.
Well, now I want to see what it does. Well, oh my gosh, are you kidding me?
No, it's like watching a live stream doing that.
Dude, really?
Wait.
Yeah,
because she's the little square with the. Scroll down. I mean, we could just be as exciting, just read all this crap to you, but we don't want to do that. It's more fun if you hear my ranting and ravings.
I was just trying to see if it even kind of gives you that.
There you go. Wait, wasn't? Oh no, that's the PO threshold.
Oh my gosh, it's bouncing all over the screen, man.
Well, that's how that screen is set up, because it's like, oh, well, you're talking about sales order. Oh, well, that's here and here and here and here.
Here we go.
All right.
Default sales rep on order.
Yeah, so it's going
Doesn't
to basically
even address it. It doesn't say.
but my guess is it's going to override your sales rep from your, or it adds another sales. Play with it. I'm not really that concerned about it.
Not enough to go check.
No. Display open quotes in OE.
Okay, this I think a lot of people don't know it's there. RMB only is you would have to right mouse button to find it. But then RMB / as you enter items is if you have an open quote for that item for that customer, it will prompt you and say, hey, you have an open quote for this. Do you want to use that price or do you want to?
I have never used
that
before.
No, it's pretty tight. It can also be incredibly annoying.
Yeah.
So, this depends on you closing quotes out in a timely fashion.
Because the way I read it was, because like if you want to search a quote in, like, if you want to use the inline search for a quote for a customer, you have to check the quote box.
Yeah.
When you're typing your in the search field or in the order number. So I thought that was tied to that, but so that's a feature I've never even used before. That's interesting.
Yeah, there is no, there's no combined search. Well, that's why we had that problem in service order entry for our P21, where we had to create a custom search that would combine both quotes and service orders.
Yep. So view vendor type. There's inventory only, and then there's asset or expenses.
Inventory and expense, and then inventory. Yeah, inventory. What? Maybe that's only confused. I don't know what that means. I'm so confused right now.
Yeah,
this is brutal.
And this is why we do these streams, people, because some of these help files.
Here we go. Well,
scroll up. Oh wait, there you go.
Wait.
No, up ahead. It's up. It's up higher. Vendor type.
The user can only access suppliers. The user can access the vendors that you're. Sure. All right.
That is so specific that, like, just pick inventory.
Yeah.
Like, that's weird. All right. Dynamic looks ahead. That is a system setting, I believe.
Yeah, that's for purchasing stuff.
And I think it's also...
If you're not using schedule releases and stuff like that, I would say go with static because it makes Porg run a little faster. Just my opinion.
And is that a setting that you set somewhere?
It's in Porg. Like when you bring up PO requirements generation, your look ahead days is a setting there.
Print preview zoom percent.
I think this is like back to the days of the desktop. I'm not even going to the help for that.
Yeah, no. Whatever. All right, let's kind of go into the middle here a little bit. Prompt before clearing.
Okay, so this is the "Are you sure?" pop-up that you get whenever you hit the clear button.
So if you have a lot of people complaining about that,
get rid of it.
You can turn. But at the same time, somebody's trying to hit save and they accidentally hit clear. Now, one thing I don't know, because it used to be in the early versions of the web, if you close the tab, it just closed it. Now in the later versions, if you close a tab of something that hasn't been saved, it now is intelligent enough to go, "Are you sure?" I don't know if that's tied to that. If that's tied to that, then yes, you need to leave that on.
That's just tied to the clear button.
Okay.
Because the other one, it's looking to see if the form is considered from a programming perspective dirty, and it's actually using JavaScript or whatever to give you a prompt from the browser. This prompt is from the application itself. Okay.
Because I can't tell you how many times when we first went on that I think it was 2019
or 20.
I think 2019 was the first one I went on, and I'd be playing and I would accidentally hit and it just close everything. I'd be like, crap. Receive system alerts. Now, is that tied to tasks or is that?
No, this is, so you have a whole other administrative, someone should have this turned on. Your admin should have this turned on. This is, hey, I couldn't send this email, or hey, this problem happened, or this alert didn't go. There are system alerts that get generated, and if you have this turned on when you first log in, it'll say, hey, there are system alerts. Do you want to view them now? And they look, we may actually have a couple in here. So if you just go to system alerts, there aren't any. But if you had some, they would be here, and then you can kind of clear them by just setting them to inactive or deleted or whatever.
So very, very specific people.
It is, but at least one person should have this turned on who's logging into P21 on a regular basis.
Okay.
Auto display rooms that's for room functionality if you're using that. Delete is a soft delete, and you can undelete. But this will keep them from logging in.
Can you? It'll still let you mark them as delete even if they have open orders?
Yes.
Okay.
Do not, under any circumstances, delete your admin user. If you delete the admin account, undeleting it doesn't fix all the stuff that admin can do. So you should actually be blocked from doing a delete on that, in my opinion, but whatever.
Prompt for electronic payments.
Yeah, so this is prompt for card information at save. So we've played with this in a few instances where we were trying to get business rules wrapped around whether something was paid in remittances, whatever. But this just is whether or not you can prompt at save for front counter, for OE, or for both. That's all that's about. Otherwise, it's going to prompt you for card information earlier in the process, basically. Enable process to AR option for failed credit cards. I would tell people have that shut off. The reason being is if somebody can't pay, the last thing you want to do is give them an open account.
Yeah.
Which is essentially what you would be doing.
And then the random just thrown at the bottom.
Like, hey, we ran out of space except for all this space over here.
Yeah, basically you hit F2 on your keyboard, you do a drill down for item maintenance. It'll just default to whatever your default user location is. So if you're not concerned about looking at inventory at all, you obviously can change it, go back to the criteria tab and clear out the locations, but it's pretty self-explanatory.
Yeah.
There's no hidden ones like at the bottom. Like sometimes some of these screens have random crap.
No, I think we're through the random crap. All right, so then we go to task options. So this is just whether or not you have access to private tasks at the role or user level. Then display related tasks for transactions upon retrieval. I think that kind of works like a customer, a mandatory note would. You can make a task kind of fly like a mandatory note. So, and then you're changing in here where that would happen. So if you had a task set up on a PO, you go and retrieve that PO and PO entry, it would display the task. I don't know that I don't think we've ever had anyone use this.
And this is not tied to the same thing as tasks maintenance, right? Like this is...
No, that's those kinds of tasks. Yep.
Oh, it is those kinds of tasks. It's just if they're going to be displayed or not. Okay.
Yep. Portal view, again, our preference is try to handle this at the role level because it's just far easier to handle 15 roles than it is 100 users. But if you have specific portals for specific people, this is how you would achieve that. Pretty self-explanatory there. All right, there's a lot going on here. And the thing is, this keeps getting bigger almost every release. I mean...
Yeah, there's things that just keep getting added in here. Like, again, Report Studio didn't have options in here at one point. It was tied to something else, and now they have some options in here.
So we'll just kind of walk through some of these. A lot of these are kind of technical back end things, but I'll do my best with them. So
Okay.
the SOA admin page, that is basically logging into the admin page for the API. This came about when they brought the P21 app into the middleware software, because it used to be 2 separate packages you install. Now you can just install the middleware, go to /profit21. The problem is that means you can also just go to /nothing and you get the admin page for the SOA. So this puts some security on that, where if they try to enter their username and password, it just won't let them in. And I mean, just for simplicity's sake, like if I go in and do that, that's the SOA page. So it controls whether or not you can log in to the middleware admin page, which should be no by default for most users. Access to web portals only. If I am correct in my thinking, it's been a few years since I've thought about this. I believe if a user can only access portals, it does not consume a license. I think
that sounds right, but I can't remember. But that sounds right.
Access to Field Chooser and Report Studio. That's just whether or not they're going to be able to add fields. I don't know what the Project Hub feature is. So
that's
whatever.
new to me.
Allowing access to the API system pool. So this is something that you're going to designate an account when you get a token for the P21 API. It has to have a username associated with it. We usually want to see a dedicated user for that, so that you can see in the audit trail that it was done via the API. So this just allows that user access to the API at all. It has nothing to do with that admin page. This is whether or not they can make calls. Allow approval of orders with a credit card hold status. It's pretty self-explanatory. Content creation, collaborate, moderation. I don't know. Those are fairly new. I'm assuming they're tied to some feature. Business rules, drill downs, metrics. You want, your administrative people and developers should have yes on those. Creation of scheduled tasks. I think you need to be extremely restrictive on who can do that.
The drill down, that's the target, and
again, I mean, I think it's I don't like seeing those getting set up willy-nilly. I really don't.
No, a lot, and that's why I was verifying that's what it meant by drill downs.
Yeah. That's Dynachange Navigator.
Right. So if the only people that should say yes on all of those that we were just talking about are the 1 or 2 people that have designer rights admin.
Yeah, I agree.
Opinion.
I agree. And I feel the same way about metrics. Scheduled tasks, that's the ability, that's whether that schedule button is going to be enabled, and you can go click on that and set up something to run, like a report or SISM or port or whatever. I just like the task scheduler in it's not the task scheduler, because that makes you think it's the Windows task scheduler, and it's not. But the scheduled task manager, the scheduled jobs in P21, well, it's complex. Okay, so I'm not. When I say we have more trouble with that than anything, I'm not bagging on Epicor about it. It's complicated.
It is.
But we see a lot of things go haywire with the scheduler. So to me, I think you need to be controlling who can do that. User-defined tabs, same thing. To me, that's admins only. Should be creating tabs. That opens up Dynachange tab creator. Project Hub, again, I don't know. DTS fulfillment transactions, couldn't tell you. Allow mass update. So this is important. Matt, you're the mass update expert. Let's talk about the dangers of giving the planet access to mass update.
Yeah, well, and there's a couple different things with mass update, and you'll see it at the top of the screen. There is mass update, and then there's mass update permissions. Mm-hmm. This toggle only controls the mass update button. The permissions are controlled by, I believe it's the admin designer, right? But because if you click on mass update permissions, it just brings a window that tells you which roles have permissions to do mass updates on the screen. I believe that's tied to, that's one of those weird fields that's tied to its own, or not its
So
own
you would
thing.
basically have to go to every screen to change this?
By default, if they have mass update, they have the permissions.
So if you wanted
But
to take permissions away from sales and user maintenance.
Right.
But if you were controlling the menu well enough, probably wouldn't be that big of a deal, right? Like if you can't even get to user maintenance, you don't really have to worry about somebody having mass update permission.
Right, yeah.
Yeah.
Right. It's only like item maintenance. Anyways, yeah, mass update again to me, maybe not as limited as your designer right admin.
Let's say
But it's
power
still
users.
super power, because you can really mess up some stuff really easy with mass update, because it's
editing data right on the database.
Yeah.
Period.
I mean, it's I like mass update for now. Report Studios kind of replaced some of that, because you could kind of use mass update to do like a query of the database using the UI instead of having to actually go open up SQL. But it's real dangerous. So again, it's
Very
one of
powerful,
those things.
but very dangerous. Yeah.
I thought we did a stream. If we didn't, it's definitely on our list. But I do have some videos on it. Power users are like no more than like maybe like one person in purchasing, maybe, because it can be real dangerous.
Well, not only that, when they go bad, it leaves a lot of trash in the system and can actually start to cause timeouts in the system. I mean, we've cleaned that up for multiple customers.
Right. If you have a bunch, because there's two different, again, we're kind of getting there's two different mass updates. There's basically the on-screen mass update where you change some columns, say set this to this, commit, or retrieve, then commit. And it just runs, and it runs real slow. And then there's the export to an Excel document, make the changes, import an Excel document, and it goes off and runs its batch. If you have like 4 or 5 people doing the maximum 10,000 lines of data, you're just dragging everything down.
Yeah.
And there's no undo.
Yeah.
So, and speaking as somebody that, now granted mine was because there was a bug in the older version where, God almighty, if you brought out 6 columns of data in your Excel document and you're like, I only need to update these 3, and you just deleted them off and you didn't clear that mass update, when you re-imported it, it remembered that those 3 columns were there.
Right.
So it went, and this happened on price sheets, because I exported 5 price sheets. I was only updating the last 2. Well, it took the first 3 and went, oh, well, those are all zeros now, and updated every single one of them to 0 for about 2,200 items.
Yeah, I mean, look.
Don't make my mistakes.
Well, you brought up another point, though. Like, there was a bug in that version of
which has been
2.21.
fixed, thank God.
Sure, as long as you've updated past that. And
Right.
my concern is we continue to see people trying to stay in that last hybrid version of P21.
That bug was definitely in that version.
Folks,
so.
it's time to get on the web.
Yeah, I mean,
It's time. This is not a fad. This is here to stay. And you know, a lot of the things that you don't like about the web, we find a lot of times it's a perception that's based on a version of the web that's 4 years old. Mm-hmm. It's time. Stop using leaded gas.
Yep.
It's time to graduate to unleaded. Okay.
Allow move pin columns on grid. I like this.
Yeah, that should be enabled. There's no reason to not enable that I can think of.
Now, I will say there are, and this goes back to, so you, as individual users, I still think we need to go through an experience of UI and all that, and you can change with this on. You can move your grids and your ways that you like, but keep in mind if somebody goes and does a mass update on that grid, it resets everybody's.
You get a dyna change.
Dyna change, yeah. It will reset all that. But yeah, this 100%, I think, because this makes it useful for certain people that use this more and don't need this. API stuff that doesn't need to be on for most people. Allow quick entry and order. This is one of my favorite things in order entry.
I like it too. For the most part, I like it. I mean, no, I like it. Yeah, I mean, it's fine.
It's a little finicky with the keyboard because, like, you have to hit
This was
but I have a-
designed. This feature was born from people being able on the desktop to type into the keyboard buffer. They could type faster than the app, which you can't do that in the web. So that's where this came from.
We have a video on the channel that covers it, but essentially it allows you to enter an item ID, tab, enter a quantity, enter an item, and it just goes. And what it's doing is while you're still typing, it's taking that lag you were talking about and verifying, oh, this is an item. And it's not doing the pricing. It's just verifying that it's items and quantities. And then when you go back to the order, that's where your lag kind of catches up to you, because it has to go through and run all those items through pricing and stock and all that stuff. Why is that?
I don't know. I don't know if it'll clear up when we save, because this is a new user. We haven't even saved this user yet.
Well, that's interesting though, but there's already a drop down on the front for creating reports.
Here you go. Maybe it's old.
Anyways.
I don't know. Resource tracing, I've very rarely even used it, but again, that's administrative level. The RMB access to things, I think, is situational. RMB delete on orders. Matt, for our customers that worry about lost sales on delete, they should be shutting this off and just forcing people to go through the cancel and lost sales process. Fully canceling service parts, that's a situational thing in service orders. Validating open orders, I think your accounting people that are doing credit releases should definitely have that. The biggest ones that I feel like people get squishy about is RMB save as, and whether or not that should be available to a user. Can that you allow them to just download information out of your system? Look, if you don't trust the person, you probably shouldn't have them in your organization.
No, and those two that are tied together, those automatically open file and save. So I'm a huge fan of.
And then there's another one. This is what kills me.
Yeah.
Enabling RMB save as is even farther down.
Yeah. So if you ever have somebody that, and that enables save as, or there's one of these other ones that's actually also tied to, some reports you can click the Excel button to put it in. I don't remember. It's one of those right mouse buttons we just talked about that are actually tied to that Excel button.
Yeah.
Even though it doesn't, I think it's the save as, the right mouse button save it. So if somebody says, hey, I know Susie can download this report to Excel, I can't.
It's probably this. Yeah.
It's probably that. I was a big fan because, again, to me, it's another way of just data dumping stuff and me being able to do pivot tables or just do some research. Or I was always a big fan of that. Always open new instance for drills.
Yeah, so I think that's like drop into another tab, or open it to another tab.
Yeah, basically if you hit F2 on your keyboard and you're on one, and then you're on another one, you do a drill down in IMI, it basically clears that original search, and where I think if you have that yes, it will allow you to have multiple IMIs open. Say no.
Yeah, because at some point it just gets out of hand. Client logging path, that again, if you're logging or whatever, you can put that there. I don't think we've ever used it. Update with successful message, again, that's something that you can have turned on or not. That goes right there with prompt for clear. It's good that they're right next to each other so that you understand those are both settings. Yeah, right. Enabling inline search at the user level. Look, folks, in 2024, if you're on the web, that needs to be turned on. That is a quality of life improvement across the board. And if you're not using it because you have performance issues, then fix the performance issue. Period.
Yeah, I mean, it's like driving a car with three wheels if you don't have that on. I mean, it is. When I ever had that argument with somebody that's been strictly, and it does not as often, because most people are now at least, I say at least, they're in 21.1. But when I would have those arguments with people that are strictly desktop, I'm like, but the inline search is so good.
Yeah,
like,
it really is. Then you're getting down into print and preview, whether that's on your right mouse button, whether save as is there. Enterprise search
again,
URL.
the
that's
save as,
old.
again, that save as is tied to you being able to just right click. Now, so the services, which again, I love how it's worded. Like it's under services. So if it's not turned on for your customer or for your user, that'll be grayed out. I don't know why they have it listed that way, but it's basically dumping to Excel, which really, for me, the only one that I think is useful is the one with save selected columns, because that one actually dumps it out into our visible columns, which is tied to save as.
You're going to see what's right there on the screen.
All right.
All right. Enterprise search URL, that's old. That goes back to a feature called ICE that's kind of never got off the ground, really. New pop-ups enabled, that is a desktop thing. So it should just be set to yes. That actually came out, I think, in 12.15.
Nice.
Yeah. Profit 21 allow. Okay, these are all for mobile sales. That could be its own thing, but you're just controlling what somebody can do, whether or not they can get into mobile sales, and then what they can do once they're in there, whether they can create orders, quotes, edit pricing, see business summaries, contact info, blah, blah, blah. Set default receipt, print, email options in order entry. I'm not 100% on that one, and I doubt.
What are the drop downs? Just yes and no for that?
Yeah, but like I don't know.
Yeah, I don't even know what
Set
that means.
default receipt. Oh, receipt. That didn't they add something in OE where you can now print a receipt? And it might only be in front counter. I don't even remember. Come on. Yeah, man, I feel like there's something else that we're missing. Let me try front counter.
Is it on the remittance tab?
No, I really thought it was. Let me see if it's different on front counter. Nope, it's not. I thought there was some new feature that dealt with receipts, but anyway, I'm guessing that sets those checkboxes by default. Oh, there you go. Show the receipt fields in order entry. So if that's turned on, then do you want to default it? Okay.
Yeah, I'm not worried.
That's a newer feature. Use contact maintenance rather than contact inquiry, and then use only the legacy UI for wireless warehouse, which I don't know if that's the legacy web UI or the legacy desktop. I'm not really sure.
That's a new one to me, so
Yeah,
I have no
that's
idea.
Brand new. Regional, I think that would only be turned on if you had some regional functionality turned on, like
Different
Europe
countries
or yeah, like there's so like if you enable the they have like a UK one, they have like an Australia, New Zealand one. Like if you enable that, for instance, it opens up, it does little things. It opens up the state field to more than 2 characters, because guess what? There's a whole world outside the United States where state codes can be more than 2 characters. So it's stuff like that. And anyway, if you have one of those enabled, then the regional thing's gonna open up to you. And that's it. I think we've run the gamut.
Yeah, I mean that's it for again. There are ways to use mass update to copy, and we can go through that on a mass update thing. But I don't think we have much longer to go, because I do want to get some done and how they work with Menu Designer. So do you want to go through that next 15-20 minutes and then we call, or do you want to take a 10-minute break? I'm good either way.
Let's take 10 and then we'll come back. We'll finish out with menus.
Okay.
Sounds good. And we are back. So I think all we have left to do to get this one over the finish line is the menu designer, yeah?
Yeah, and I think we can kind of tie into, well, the same theory goes with menu designer as it does with Dyna changes, I guess, on how you can use roles to control permissions.
Yeah, I was thinking during the break, maybe because I'm trying to think of how I want to say this. I think there's some confusion or apprehension or maybe some what I would call unfounded fear on the skill sets that you should have in-house and whatever. Just like maybe an overview on, look, this, if you're going to administrate a P21 system, here's kind of the minimum skill set that you want to have inside your building to be able to do that effectively. These are sort of the in and out tasks that are going to happen, and things that you might want to handle quickly, other things you might say, well, we're just going to farm that out or whatever, whether it's to us or somebody else, whatever. But I think there's just like, I see people, oh, well, we'll go hire XYZ to do that. I'm like, at any price, you should be doing that in-house, because it's just more effective. Anyway, I don't know. Just random thoughts for a future live stream.
Yes.
So menu designer.
Does the role you're logged in have?
Yeah, I think I'm logged in as admin.
All right. So here's my first nitpick of menu designer.
It's not on the menu?
Yeah. You can't launch menu designer from the actual menu.
Well, that would be crazy.
You have to launch it from within a window. And you'll notice that he quickly right-clicked menu designer.
Gosh,
click.
You're killing me.
So it does live under the Dynachange menu designer. Now you notice when he did this, he did have a. Go ahead and click it.
Am I allowed to now for real?
You're allowed to. So when you do this, it's going to pop up and show you, and just like on a Dynachange, which is relative to what window you're on, menu designer will show you all menus, and you can see this one is named menu design or menu admin all. Make sure you're naming these menus something that makes sense, and then you can also see what roles they're assigned to or users. Now, again, I am not an advocate of creating menus for particular users, but if it happens and you need to, make sure you put their username in the actual title of the menu. Just makes it easier to maintain.
I think it will actually append that automatically.
No, because you can add it to multiple users.
Oh,
It's not
yeah.
it's not just one specific user. It's just like a Dynachange where you can say these 3 users get this. Which if you're picking more than 1 or 2 users, then they probably need to be in a role together.
Could be.
But keep in mind, if you assign anything at a user level, it ignores their role. So whatever you set up their role, it doesn't matter.
Yep.
They get what's assigned to their user.
Yeah,
so
and it's not cumulative, right? So it's like, that's what you get.
Right, and you can't assign a user. Let's create a new one, though. You cannot create or assign a user to multiple menus, and you can't assign a role to multiple menus. When you try to do that, and that's why I want you to do a new one here, because when we go to save this, it'll show you if a role or a user is already assigned to another menu. Just so, because here's something that happened. Not that it ever happened to me about a dozen times. If you wipe off all the users and roles on a Dynachange or a menu designer, it goes away.
Yeah. So this is. So, I was talking earlier about having an administrative account that you use separately to do this kind of stuff. I will tell you this. I had my best luck having a second login for this kind of stuff, and I would do my Dynachanges and do all my stuff, and I would apply it only to that administrative user, test it, make sure I was happy with it, then start blowing it out to other roles. But in so doing, you can delete it off all the roles, but you still have a copy of it on your user, which is nice.
So essentially what you're doing on the left, it's got them all open. You can hit the collapse all and it'll shrink them all down.
I actually always start off by doing that.
Yeah. So if he clicks on accounting, just click on the actual header accounting, we can enable or disable the whole tree.
Actually.
Oh no, you can't. You have to.
It's got to be the next layer down is where you can start working with.
That's another conversation.
Well, I think if you shut all of them off, it gets rid of the other one, I think, but I don't know.
Yeah, if you shut off these 5 individuals, I do think accounting disappears as the. But if he just checks the the enabled box, it's got the red X. So if he opens that tree up under accounts payable, everything underneath that tree, even though it doesn't have a red X to it, you can't get to.
Yeah, and so this little blue line, I believe, that represents a screen. Something that, like that's a base layer menu item.
Now, if you didn't want to, and now there's some issues where that kind of becomes an issue because there may be an inquiry that you want somebody to have, like customer master inquiry lives in CRM and it lives in customer receivable, I believe, or accounts receivable. If you have them both shut off for your standard sales guys, they won't be able to see if they need it, but they won't be able to see it. So you can't just shut it all off.
Right.
You have to go through, and now you can, each of those trees, like you can shut off maintenance, report, system.
Yeah. So we could go in and say this is an account. Let's say this is a person that does AR, but they're not an administrative level user. So you can go through there and say, okay, well, we definitely want them to have inquiry, so we'll leave that.
Yep.
You can go through here and go, okay, from maintenance, we want them to do that. We don't want them to do corporate credit limits. We don't even use this in our system. So like if you're actively not using features and not going to use features, shut them off in the menu and declutter it. Make it easier for people to find.
It makes it much nicer when you're trying to find stuff you're looking for.
You're not using dealers. Get it out of there. If you don't want them adjusting credit limits, blah, blah, blah. And so this gives you a way to kind of have the best of both worlds.
And you can, like, if he clicks on system, like the actual main menu of system for that one, or even on the main.
Yeah. So like this person, we wouldn't want them to have anything under system.
Right.
So just shut it off. Done.
So this is now. So again, here's something else I want to add to the. So go down to order entry for me. Go find order entry. Go to order processing. Transaction. Orders. So something I like to do in my search text, I like to add the word sales in front of that. What that does is, now here's something I found out. It doesn't matter what menu you do this under. It actually applies it to all of them.
I'm also a fan of dropping like a code at the end too, like OE.
Yeah. I did it for Porg, where I actually put -Porg after it. Because if not, you have to type PO space R space G to get Porg. So, I wouldn't mess with the actual text. I would leave that alone as this, but the search text you can add in there, and then that will apply to that inline search. Now, before you hit save, if you don't want to have to create a whole menu because every time you start a new one, it's from the ground up. What you can do is you can open an existing one, make some changes, and use the save as.
Yeah, to create a version of it or
to create a version of it.
Yep.
The default button should be called the delete button.
Yeah, because it wipes everything out. It resets it to default.
Right. So if you hit default and then hit save, that menu is gone. And it'll actually tell you that when you hit default, it'll go, do you want to delete this or return this to system, whatever it is. It should be called delete. I get why it's called default, but just keep that in mind.
So you can also add menu items. So if I say, add a new menu entry, and you can do that, you right click on the appropriate place in the tree. You've got some different options here that you can put in for a user-defined menu item, whatever the text of it is, whatever the search text is. Run exe or URL. Really in the web, that's for URLs. But it's nice where if you we use this a lot. So a lot of times when we're developing something, it's an application that is accessed from inside P21, but it's completely separate from P21. So we'll just put a URL to it into a menu item. People get to it from P21. It spawns another tab. We kind of style them to look similar to P21, and the user still feels like they're in the system. So that's nice. You can tie them off to portals.
Reports.
You can run rules with them. I don't know that that's as robust as it was in the desktop. I know we had trouble with that for a while. I'm not sure if that's all been cleaned out or cleared up. But yeah, you're right. You can also do external reports off of it as well. So that now, and it tells you this here in this warning, but it's worth repeating. When you create a user-defined menu item, no matter what role you create it on, it is available by default to every version of every menu. So if you wanted to disable that for some of the role or the menus that already exist or menu versions that exist, you would have to go in and edit those versions of those menus to take it back out.
Which again goes back to do not have 100 menus based on users.
Right. Make it something you can control.
Right.
Yeah.
And I'll add this to me, the biggest reason for wanting to add things on the menu as a user, and it seems silly, but they do not like having to access another system to do their jobs. Like they feel like they're having to go outside of P21 to do, even though it still just opens a tab, which is what P20. So it makes them feel like they're still just using one system.
Well, and it gives you a single entry point to get to any of the resources that you need. I really like doing it that way. I think we've had a really good response to that type of design when we've proposed that to customers. I actually like it way better on the web. Once we have you in a browser, spawning a new tab is no big deal.
Yeah.
You know.
All right. So again, you can go through all those and do all you want. You don't really need to. When you hit save, it's just like any other data change. It's going to ask you who you want to assign it to. You actually have this. How do you have this set up? Because there's not a menu designer showing for all roles.
Because the all role already has a menu assigned.
Right, but it still would show it there. It would just have an red asterisk next to it. It must be however your designer permissions for your user maintenance are set up.
Oh, yeah. You know what? It probably is.
It's probably user and role.
Yeah.
But anyways.
So we'll assign that to sales.
You got to put a description. Again, make sure, again, this should be a limited amount of people that you trust to actually put stuff in there and actually do it right.
Yeah. And again, these menus are cached at logon. So even if you make a change midstream, that role will still have that functionality or not have it until they log out and log back in.
Click the default button just so people can see what it does. And see, that's why it should be called deleted, because it doesn't even allow you to say, like, it's just deleted. It's gone.
Yep. And so now if we close this and go back into the menu designer, that whole thing, all that stuff we just did is gone.
Yeah, so it doesn't, it's misleading, because what that pop-up should say is, are you sure you want to permanently delete this? And it doesn't say that. What it says is, do you want to restore to defaults, which I guess is the same thing, but if you accidentally click it, it's real weird that it's not letting you see.
I'm actually kind of curious about that.
Because you should be able to.
Yeah, I have everything.
That's really weird.
Whatever.
That's not how that's supposed to be.
All right.
Could be a
glitch in the matrix. Who knows? Oh, I
there
don't
wasn't
do that.
Yeah, we were just talking about that.
Yeah.
Was there a toggle on the user maintenance that we weren't thinking of?
I don't think so. Because this one. Well, okay, let's do this. We should let's just get rid of that. So. Alright, so we get rid of it. Now we should have nothing. Yeah, see, it's not even prompting me for that. And so then if I just go and make some random change and save. Yeah, see, it's there. So it's because it already had an assignment.
Then that must be something new, because I know like on screen dyna changes, it doesn't do that.
Yeah, it's different. It does work differently in Screen Designer a little bit. But yeah, I agree. It's kind of confusing.
Because it will have a red asterisk next to it that says this has already been configured, or this has already been assigned to another screen.
Yeah.
I guess I just assume Menu Designer did the same thing.
Matt, I think we've run this one to ground, man.
Yeah, you know, it wasn't going to be a super long conversation, but it's important.
So we should be back next Friday. I say should. That might get railroaded. Not sure yet, but as soon as we know for sure, we'll get a scheduled live stream up so that you guys know. But other than that, we really appreciate you guys joining us, and thanks for hanging out with us for the mid-morning, afternoon, wherever it is in your part of the country. And we will definitely see you next time.
See ya.